Hello and welcome. I am Tania Johnson, registered psychologist, registered play therapist, co-founder of the Institute of Child Psychology. Today, I'm thrilled to be doing a lesson on managing childhood anxiety. Let's get started together. I think unfortunately, over the last decade or so, there's been such a strong approach towards really looking at anxiety as a symptom and as at the child in isolation. So we go, okay, what do we do to make sure that this child goes to school? These are the building blocks that we put in place. Or how do we teach this child to breathe? Or how do we teach this child to conquer negative thoughts? Which all in all, as strategies by themselves are okay. But we're failing in that we have stopped looking at the system that a child lives within. And I can tell you right now that if we do not begin to look at the depths of what is happening for a child, that child, although their symptoms might be alleviated for a short period of time, it is really just 3, 6, 9 months until that child is struggling again. And they're back in a therapist's office, whether it's my office or somebody else's office, because we haven't actually dealt with the roots of the problem. So we're going to talk about roots of anxiety, and then we're going to do some work around the brain together. So many of our children are struggling, and we're seeing an increase in anxiety, not only because it's getting diagnosed more frequently, we're more aware of the symptoms and the signs. Mental health has become more normalized. We can actually talk about being anxious, but we're also seeing an increase because many of our kiddos are not having their gas tank filled anymore. The things that make us feel good, the things that bring down our stress levels. So things like getting outside, being deeply connected to other adults and to other peers, having people who can go, they are my role model, they are my anchor, it's mom, it's dad, it's grandma, those really important people in our lives. Play is huge. As a registered play therapist, I can't even begin to reiterate how incredibly important play is. Our children aren't playing outside. They're not moving their bodies enough. They're often overstimulated by technology. So we have these sedentary bodies being bombarded by frenzied images constantly. And the result often is disconnection too. So lots of our kids are living these disconnected lives where they're not outside anymore, sledding, riding bikes, laughing, connecting with others, having one-on-one time with mom and dad. And then we look at it and we go, but why is my child anxious? I can tell you right now, if we don't really start to reflect on what's happening for our children, that we're never actually going to get to the point where they experience a deep sense of well-being. I have a little one who struggles with anxiety, and it can be hard for me to not just look at her and go, how do we fix her anxiety, but actually to look at my own family's life and go, okay, how much have we connected? How much are we on our screens? Are we spending time outside? What does she need? How do we anchor her to a sense of purpose? As a psychologist, as a mama, that's much, much harder. So today I'm going to offer you some strategies for your little ones, but I'm also going to ask you to come back to this here, to our iceberg. So I'm going to explain the iceberg in a second, but to come back to this iceberg and deeply ask yourself, what is one small shift that we can make? Is it getting outside for 10 minutes every day? Is it turning off screens in the morning? What is one small thing that we can do? So the iceberg image here talks about our tendency to focus on the symptom, to focus on what we see at the top, while ignoring what's actually going on underneath. The other thing where we've kind of gone wrong when really helping our kids with anxiety is this deeply cognitive approach. Well, how do we get you to school? What's wrong? You need to just back up and get to school right now. Or, yes, everybody's anxious, be a big boy. All of these words that we give our kids that are often representative of the fact that we're stressed, we're anxious, we're trying to get control over a situation that we often feel out of control of. So it's important that we start to really understand how anxiety works. Very often our children pick up on signals in our environment before we're even aware, before there's any verbal recognition or any kind of cognitive recognition of something going on. So they've picked up on something feels uncomfortable, or a person's given a look where they feel uncomfortable suddenly. They've picked up on something. There's some energy where their body picks up on energy where they don't feel safe. those messages travel up the spinal cord, all the way up the spinal cord, come to the brainstem over here. The brainstem is responsible for that fight, flight, freeze response. It also helps to regulate our bodily responses to the world. We'll talk about that in a second. So it comes up to this brainstem here. It then travels up to the middle part of the brain, which is our feelings part of the brain, our limbic part of the brain. This is where raw feelings live. So suddenly there's this feeling of fear, still no words. And then eventually it comes up to this prefrontal cortex over here, which is where words live. When this prefrontal cortex is online, we can go, what's scaring me right now? What do I need? Who do I need? Very often, though, our anxious children get stuck at the back here, that fight, flight, freeze response, and just this raw emotion of just feeling utmost worry or fear without being able to connect to what's really going on. So with that being said, I want you to remember that anxiety always happens body, heart, and then the mind. Body, heart, brain. We want to slow down on the amount of words that we give our kids, on the amount of strategies that we give our children, and work with their bodies and hearts first. And when they're ready, we come to the brain. Over here in this picture, and I'm sure for all of us, because we've all experienced anxiety at some point, we'll be aware of kind of what we often see when our children are stressed out, that fight, flight, freeze response. This is when there's lots of adrenaline going through the body. We'll often feel our palms will start to sweat. We'll feel quite nauseous. Some people might have issues with bladder weakness. We can feel that tension over here. Our pupils will dilate. Our mouth will go a little bit dry. Our heart often beats a little bit quicker. We'll often feel trembling in our extremities. Like I said, everybody will experience this at some point. A little bit of anxiety is actually a pretty good thing. It prepares us for important times in our life. It's when our children are chronically stressed that we start to worry. So we've touched on this already. We have, at the Institute, we have much longer courses, really comprehensive courses on anxiety. We have a number of different types of courses on anxiety. So this is just going to be an introduction to really starting to consider how to look at your child's anxiety from a different perspective. Okay, so as mentioned, when our children start to feel stressed, they first feel it at the back part of their brain here, the brainstem. And then those messages travel up to the midbrain, to the limbic brain. That's our feelings brain. And then eventually it comes up to our thinking brain, our prefrontal cortex. So over here, this brainstem, the brainstem is important in helping us to regulate our responses to the world. This is where a lot of our more automatic functions of the body take place. Our ability to perspire, to breathe, it helps to regulate all of our different bodily functions. It all happens here in this brainstem. The other thing that happens is our stress response to the world. This is where we go, oh, there's danger. And again, that fight, flight, freeze response. The limbic brain, this is our feelings brain. This is where attachment lives. Beyond words, though, attachment is this deep feeling of, am I safe? Am I not safe? Are you a safe person? Are you not a safe person? Who do I flock to when I'm scared? And then who do I flock away from when I'm scared? All of that lives here in this knowing part of the brain, in this feeling part of the brain. That's the limbic system. And then we have our prefrontal cortex. This is the thinking brain. So again, this is where children will learn and they'll go, last time I was scared, I spoke to mom and I jotted down some things in my journal and then I was able to move forward. How could I do that this time? So that all comes from this thinking part of the brain. The brainstem always asks, am I safe? This part of the brain always asks, am I loved? And this part of the brain, our thinking part of the brain, always asks, am I competent? And so when our children are anxious, we always work from the bottom up. So we always help them first with, am I safe? Am I loved? Am I competent? It's important to move slowly. I often feel as if we look after, am I safe? And am I loved first? Am I competent comes more easily. But often we want to rush to that competency. Stay here with your children. Am I safe? Am I loved? Am I competent? So really what we're looking at here is regulate, relate, reason. We can only really help our children to regulate, relate, reason if they are in relationship with us. So at the Institute, we kind of are a little bit cheeky and we add a fourth R. This is all based on Bruce Perry's work. And we say, first, we need the relationship because our kids will only regulate with us if they feel safe with us. So first we have the relationship, and then we work on regulate, relate, reason. Love this quote here. The most powerful tool we possess for changing behavior is the relationship that we have with a child. Okay, so regulate, brainstem. Am I safe? One of the biggest things that I really want parents and professionals to remember is that when our children are anxious, there's a lot of cortisol going through their bodies, lots of adrenaline. We want them to be able to move their body. The last thing that we want is for them to sit at the teacher's desk or to sit at the counselor's desk and try and work out some beautiful learning plan. Get them moving. That's probably my favorite strategy. So whether it's getting them into the gym and playing basketball with them, whether it's going for a walk with them, whether it's going for a bike ride, whether it's just saying, let's move our bodies together, or let's do 10 jumping jacks, or I can see you're really worried right now. Let's just go jump this out on the trampoline, and then we'll figure out what to do next. Research has actually shown that rhythmic movement calms their brainstem response. Get your kiddo moving. If possible, change their temperature. So when we change temperatures, we also shift emotional states. So again, the last thing that we want is our kid sitting like this, crouched, same temperature, not moving their body. We want them to, if possible, move from inside to outside, outside to inside, whatever's going to change their temperature, take off their sweater, get them moving their body, get that blood moving throughout their body, blood moving back up into the brain. Get them to open up their bodies. When our bodies are crouched like this, cortisol increases in the body. When we open up their bodies, which happens very naturally when we walk, ride a bike, play basketball with them, when we open up the bodies, cortisol tends to decrease. So get them moving, change those temperatures for our kiddos. I find, often, and for some children will work with regulating, breathing obviously helps to regulate what's happening in that body. But for many children, they'll say to me, it doesn't help. You keep telling me to take breaths and it doesn't help. Whereas if I don't even focus on the breaths, I don't focus on any strategies, I don't focus on the butterfly hug hug can help regulate the body too. I tend to stay far away from strategies at this point and just, like I said, get them moving, get them outside. Don't talk too much. I often say just as few sentences as possible. If they start talking to you, then we can respond. But really, we don't want to overwhelm them at this point. The other thing that we can do with regulating is get them to take a sip of water. When they swallow, we know that that thinking brain is coming online a little bit more. Get them to have a snack. But really, we're just trying to hydrate their bodies, give them some nutrition, and just get them to move those stress hormones around the body. That's regulate. Relate. Am I loved? So let's say we've gone for a walk, we've played basketball with them, we've run around the house, we've got them to move their bodies as much as possible. And then we say, let's go and have a hot chocolate together. Or let's go get a snack. Those were some really big feelings that were coming up there. Here we want them to start talking to us. So we're going to listen in. We're going to label feelings when they're there. So we might say to them, oh, yeah, that was so hard. We can also label their reactions. Oh, I can see your heart is beating so quickly right now. We can give permission for the feeling. So we can say, it's okay. It's okay, I get it. We all get frustrated sometimes. We can use touch. I'm right here, if the child feels okay with it. And then just listen. That is our whole goal here, is we want those words, we want those feelings to come out. So just allow that emotional dump to happen. There's no fixing it at this point. Children are going to be different here. Kids are going to start talking different, or they'll be more motivated to talk for different reasons. So with my little girl, for example, who does get anxious, when I say to her, oh, I can see you're very worried, she'll say to me, don't use validation on me. Or don't use your therapist's voice on me. So with kiddos who don't do well to us saying, I see you're worried, I often just say, we want to stay as quiet as possible, stay with them, stay in the same room. You'll figure out proximity. Some kids want us close. Some kids want us a little bit further away. Some kids might want us to actually leave, but we keep coming back. So they're going to say, just leave me alone. Get out of my room. So we'll say, okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of space. But as the adult, I'm going to keep coming back to say, hey, I'm here. What do we need? Or I'm right here if you need me, I'm sitting right outside, or I'm going to go get you a cup of tea. Gauge what they need. We don't need to always sit right there with them, but we stay with them and close, and we give them a whole heart. We focus here on co-regulation, so important. So we're just by ourselves, but as the adult in this, we're taking those deep breaths, making sure our shoulders are relaxed, our face is relaxed. And then as they start to talk, we give them as much space as possible. And when needed, we might say, I get it. Oh, now I understand. Different strategies for different kids. Figure out what your kid needs. But most of all here, they need an anchor to calmness. And then, so we've gone regulate. Am I safe? That's getting them to just move those stress hormones around. Am I loved? Remember, we're trying to push all of this information up. Am I loved? That's co-regulating. It's getting them to have that emotional dump. Let them cry. We want it out of their bodies. We don't want them to stuff down feelings. And then when we're ready, we got to reason, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain. Am I competent? Take your time here. I often talk about a flow activity. So I find it really helpful if I've got some Lego or a puzzle, or with older kids, maybe some pens where we can doodle. So they've given me these big feelings, and maybe I get them a snack or a drink, and then I start to doodle. We sit side by side, so we're not staring at each other, side by side, or car drive, whatever it might be. And then I'll say, what happened today? Or, what are some ways we could figure out how to help you at school when you feel all alone? Or I might even just say, you were feeling all alone. And just wait. So it's this flow activity. We're creating a bridge to start to figure out, what do they need next? Okay, so this is based on the incredible work of Dr. Ross Green, who I deeply encourage you to go and look at. At this point here, this is where we want to be careful, because this is where all of those more cognitive strategies come into place. Instead of looking at the long list of strategies that we are all probably familiar with, those lesson plans, the red light, green light, all those sorts of things, I want you instead to look at this child deeply and ask yourself, what is really going on here? So when we believe it's a wound, we tend to be more judgmental. We tend to think the child is willful or defiant. We tend to think, oh, they're just lazy. They just need attention. We end up using lots of rewards and punishments. And really the child, we haven't dealt with the root issue. So really the child just ends up feeling more frustration, more guilt, and more shame. But when we go, what's actually getting in the way of this kiddo? What do they need? We tend to be more curious. We tend to go, what are the stresses? How do we minimize those stresses? What are the skills that they're needing? How do we build those skills? What are the barriers? How do we remove the barriers? And then how do we strengthen this child? How do we start to work on their feelings of competency? To me, this is also all about, who is this child's village? Who do we need to get involved here right now? When we do this, children tend to go, I am seen. I am not just a problem to be sorted out. I am deeply seen, and I feel deeply supported. So really, at the end, find the stresses, reduce them, and then we can slowly build competency. Find the unmet needs, meet them, find the skill deficits, teach them. To me, this is all about looking at relationships. So what's happening with mom? What's happening with dad? What's happening with peers? What's happening at school? Where is this child feeling most supported? Where are they feeling unsupported? How do we work on those relationships? What's happening in their environments? Are their environments overwhelming? Are they underwhelming? What do we need to shift? What do we need to shift in their day so that they're not going to sleep every night with a fully engaged stress system? How do we work on their day from the time they wake up to the time that they go to sleep to bring down that stress response? So often we'll do things like a child feels really anxious at bedtime, so we focus on that bedtime routine without actually taking into account that we need to go way back and look at their day. It's just now that they're stopping, that they're lying in bed, that they're feeling the full extent of that stress response. We need to go back to the beginning of their day and work on those building blocks. And this is not about changing everything. For many of us, we're working, there's daycare, there's hockey, there's homework. This is just looking at our day and going, what is one small shift that we can make? And once we have that in place, what is another small shift? What's working for our family and what's not working for our family anymore? Again, deeply seeing the child and the family for who they are. Okay, so biggest things here. Look at the roots. Ask yourself what's happening for this kid. How do we work on environment and relationship? Stop talking so much and instead, am I safe? Get them to move, get them to change temperature, get them to eat, get them to drink. Get them to breathe if they can. They breathe very naturally through physical activity. Being outside in nature also brings down the stress response. Am I loved? Giving them space however they need it to express what's going on for them. Am I competent? What is standing in the way of this child to be the very best version of themselves? Here are some of our favorite books: The Kissing Hand, The Huge Bag of Worries, Scaredy Squirrel, and then Dr. Dawn Huebner, What to Do When You Worry Too Much. She actually has a beautiful new series out called Mighty Fears, which targets individual fears, like fears around baddies and villains, fears around vomiting, fears around animals. They're fantastic and they're targeted for kids. And then again, some of our faves at the Institute. I'll just point out a few of my absolute favorites. Parenting from the Inside Out is very dense, but it's great therapy if you're up for it. Any of Dr. Dan Siegel's books are fantastic. No Drama Discipline and The Whole Brain Child are two of our favorites. Listen is great for little ones. The Highly Sensitive Child, 1 in 5 children have a highly sensitive nervous system, is also really, really great. And then Simplicity Parenting is the last one. There's two here. Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne is fantastic when we talk about just settling the nervous system through looking at our entire day. And then Dr. Laura Markham, she has a wonderful website, Aha Parenting. Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids is great. She also has a great one on helping siblings. So that's all from me for now. Like I said, at the Institute, we have a variety of different courses. We have one course, Childhood Anxiety, that is highly comprehensive. And then we have a number of other courses to help children with specific issues. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.